showing we don't need roads.
Mr. Sinise, how are you, sir?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm Jake Hamilton here in Chicago, and it is seriously such an honor to be able to meet you, man. I'm such a huge fan. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Oh, nice to meet you, Jake. Thanks for having me today.
Absolutely. I'm ready to jump into it if you are.
Yes, sir.
Fantastic. One of the things that I love about you is that you are one of the actors that's most associated with really taking your celebrity and using it for good and helping others. I'm just sort of curious, do you remember the moment, a watershed moment when you realized, like, my position in life is a gift, but it's a gift that can be used to help other people?
Yeah, I think, I wrote a book, Jake, about 3 years ago. It came out called Grateful American. It came out in February of 2019, and there's a chapter in there called Turning Point. And it's the September 11th moment, the September 11th attack on our country, the turning point that happened to me at that moment. And really leading up to it, I had been involved with, supporting veterans going back into the 80s in Chicago. And then I played Lieutenant Dan in Forrest Gump and got involved with working with our wounded back in the 90s. But then there was that moment, that devastating, terrible tragedy of September 11th, 2001, and the desperate need to do something that was just, begging at me. And my heart was broken and I wanted to reach out. And so I just volunteered and started full force. The seeds that were planted in the 80s and 90s, but it grew into a full-on mission after September 11, 2001.
For 20 plus years, which is incredible. I do want to talk about your history with Steppenwolf here in Chicago. That is a stage, obviously, that has housed some of the greatest actors of all time. And I'm sort of curious, what do you think it is about that theater that turns out such great talent, such as yourself, and how did your time there affect the person and the actor that you became today?
Well, everything I know about acting is because of what we did in the early days at Steppenwolf. If you look at it, so we're let's see, we're 2023 now. Steppenwolf got started 49 years ago in 1974. So we're going on 50 years looking back at the early beginnings of Steppenwolf. I got passionate about acting as a high school kid in Highland Park, Illinois, and met my buddy there, Jeff Perry, and we went to high school together. He went down to Illinois State University, met a very good buddy there and named Terry Kinney, and some other great talent like John Malkovich and Laurie Metcalf and Moira Harris and others. And when Jeff was at college, I just started up this theater company with a bunch of kids graduating high school. And next thing you know, we're taking up residence in the basement of a closed down Catholic school in 1976. And here we look back all these years later, we have a massive complex at North and Halsted there, over 50 artists on the roster with the ensemble, writers, directors, producers, people that work in the business, actors. And so many people have come out of there. I think we just, back in the days, there were a handful of off-loop theaters, and Steppenwolf was one of them. And we started taking our shows to New York. They became very popular. We attracted new artists. More and more artists came to the company, and it just blossomed into what it is today. This full-on massive building and international reputation.
It's funny. I've been doing junkets for like 20 years by this point, and I feel like whenever I meet actors, they're divided into two groups: actors who wished they grew up working in Chicago and actors who grew up working in Chicago. Like, every time I ever lead off with, if I ever slate with Jake Hamilton, Good Day Chicago, I always inevitably get, oh my God, Steppenwolf. Like, I wish I could have had that experience. So I love hearing you talk about that.
Oh, it's wonderful. There's some great chapters in my book about the early days of Steppenwolf and all the crazy stuff that went on. Many times along the way, we didn't know if we were going to make it. And lots of difficulties, lots of challenges, but we overcame those, and we just kept pressing on, and now it's a full-on Chicago institution.
I love that. Because of my job and because of I do junkets, a lot of people often want to ask me about different actors. Have you met this person or have you met that person? But whenever I meet someone who has served or serves our country, 9 times out of 10, 99 times out of 100, they ask me, have you met Gary Sinise? Can you talk to me? I guess just about your long history of interacting with our military. You travel the world meeting our first responders. And I'm sure that like they get excited to meet you too because of who you are. But can you talk about your excitement to meet them?
Well, yeah, absolutely. That's the reason I went, started going on trips and overseas and all of that. I wanted to go and shake hands and pat folks on the back and take photographs with them, boost morale, lift their spirits. I was really rocked by September 11th, and that whole thing just scared me. And I was scared for my country. I was scared for my children, my family, what was going on. It was a difficult time, Jake, and very, very frightening time. And I wanted to be a part of supporting the men and women who were deploying in reaction to that terrible event. Having Vietnam veterans in my own family, and remembering what it was like for our Vietnam veterans to come home from war, and the nation was really torn apart over that war, and Vietnam veterans got swept aside, and they had to, hide. It was not a good time to be in the military back then. I didn't want that to happen to our current active duty service members deploying to Iraq and Afghanistan. So I raised my hand for the USO, and I started visiting the troops. And then I said, hey, I play some music. Can I take the band? And, I put a band together and we started going out. We've done probably 540 concerts for the military over the years on military bases across the world and across our country. And each time I go out there and do that, I see, what just showing up can do for somebody. If you show up and you wrap your arms around them, you play some music for them, you show them that you care, I think it can help keep them strong. And these military families go through a lot. We don't even know. That's why I'm involved with this particular play that we're putting on at Steppenwolf this weekend. It's very much in line with what I've tried to do with my service and with my foundation's mission. And now we're pleased to be able to bring this all-veteran play called Last Out to Steppenwolf Theater on Friday and Saturday night.
I want to talk about just the vessel that art can be to get a bigger message across. Because obviously, like, you can travel and you can shake hands, but whenever you can pack a theater and tell a story in a finite amount of time, and a sold-out crowd can walk out and tell those people. Or maybe you play a veteran in a film that wins Best Picture, and that's a story that people are telling. The power of art and what art has done to be able to still get this message out. I mean, I just wanted to speak to that.
Yeah, it's very powerful. Storytelling is something that, I mean, we all respond. We all see our own lives in the movies and television shows and theater pieces that we see. And the books we read, we can relate to so many of the things so often. And what we're hoping to do with Last Out is much like when I played Lieutenant Dan in Forrest Gump. I got so many letters and people reaching out to me who were Vietnam veterans. I was playing a Vietnam veteran. He was wounded. I was playing a disabled Vietnam veteran. I got so many letters and phone calls and whatnot. The Disabled American Veterans Organization contacted me about 6 weeks after that movie opened, and they were doing their national convention in Chicago that summer. It was August of 1994, and they invited me to come to their national convention. And I walked out on stage, and there were 2,000 wounded veterans going back all the way to World War II. And they were applauding me for playing Lieutenant Dan. That galvanized my support for our wounded way back when. And I saw the power of what playing that character actually did for people. And I remember way back when in the 1980s, I wanted to speak to the Vietnam veteran experience. So I looked for a piece that I could direct based on the stories of Vietnam veterans. And I found one called Tracers that was written by a group of Vietnam veterans. They were performing it on stage in Los Angeles. I went to see it. I loved it. I asked them if I could do it in 1984. We put it up at Steppenwolf. I wanted to make it free for veterans. So every Tuesday night would be the Vets Night, and we'd have 200 veterans out in the audience every Tuesday night. The word spread across Chicago that we were doing this play, and Vietnam veterans came to see it. We were telling their stories, and then we would have these post-show discussions with our cast and the veterans. Well, when I discovered Last Out, written by Lieutenant Colonel Scott Mann, who had served in Afghanistan, the Special Forces, he was dealing with a lot of very troubling things. Somebody encouraged him to tell his story, to write his story. He wrote a play, started performing it with an all-veteran cast, and it was exactly the modern day equivalent to the Vietnam play that I did back in the 80s. And that's why the Gary Sinise Foundation is sponsoring Last Out this Friday and Saturday at Steppenwolf Theater.
You know, you bring a show like this here to Chicago, and you travel the world, and you shake hands, and you boost morale. But it's also something that you can't do by yourself. So I'm glad you brought up the foundation. Whenever you, at the end of a year, December 31st, realize that you guys have raised, what is it, over $1.8 million, that enough people recognize the importance and the significance of this, how does that make you feel?
Well, the foundation has actually raised hundreds of millions of dollars.
Sure. I'm sorry. This was just like, I think the last year, the last year number.
Yeah. I mean, it's incredible. Our year-end campaign, all of a sudden we're online and we're talking about some of the things we're doing, and people donate. You're right. We had a wonderful year-end campaign this year, but we've raised hundreds of millions of dollars over the years. The foundation, launched it in 2011. We build homes for our wounded. We take Gold Star children to Disneyland, Disney World, and we do all kinds of outreach. Obviously, I said the Lieutenant Dan Band, my band, is a program of the Gary Sinise Foundation. So we've sent the band to hundreds of bases around the world. Those shows are all for free. The foundation pays the musicians. I play for free, and we have to put up the production costs and everything like that. But the American people that donate to the Gary Sinise Foundation help us to provide these services all across many military and veteran and first responder spaces. Mm-hmm. It's beautiful. I mean, it makes the spotlight that I've had as an actor in theater, film, and television, and it makes it worth something. I can actually do something with that spotlight, shine it on other people, point people in the direction where they can actually help our defenders and do some good with it. And it's been a good feeling to know that you can take your success and the blessings of your success and point it in some positive directions for other people.
I love that. Next year, believe it or not, is the 30th anniversary of Forrest Gump. And like you said, it's a movie that it's about a lot of things, but I think one of the most positive things to come out of that movie is the recognition of the veterans and how they were treated when they came home, and how we can be better moving forward into the future. I know your co-star Tom Hanks also does a lot with veterans. I believe he just created a coffee line where he's donating the proceeds to veterans. I'm just sort of curious, did you guys start having conversations on that set? Like what sort of conversations about this were inspired between the two of you that made both of you go off and do such incredible things?
We just had a good time making the movie. That's what I remember. But for me, like I said, just about 6 weeks after that movie opened, we shot it in 1993. It opened in 1994, July 6, 1994. And just shortly after that, I got called by the Disabled American Veterans. I didn't know who the DAV was. I didn't know who they were. And at that time, having veterans in my own family, Vietnam veterans, having been involved with Vietnam veterans in the 80s, as I said, through the play Tracers in Chicago at Steppenwolf, I was focused on our Vietnam veterans. So getting that part and being able to play the Vietnam veteran in Forrest Gump I just really wanted to get that. And I was fortunate that I did. And then I started to meet men and women who had served there, disabled veterans, triple amputees, people that, had really suffered after that. And I found that, there was a way that I could take the Lieutenant Dan character and do some good with it. I started visiting the hospitals, and after September 11th, when we deployed to Afghanistan and Iraq, we started having wounded come back. We started losing people. I started visiting them in different places, going into the hospitals. I'd walk in, they wouldn't know what my name was, but they'd recognize me as Lieutenant Dan from Forrest Gump, and they'd want to talk about the character. And here I am, I'm standing over a hospital bed of somebody who's lost his legs, lost an arm, lost an eye, whatever it is. And they want to talk to me about Lieutenant Dan. And I could see that when I would speak to them about being in the movie and all of that, their faces would light up. I remember the first time I walked into a hospital, it was at Landstuhl Medical Center in Germany. And I walked into a room filled with about 30 warriors that they were banged up, but they were going to get patched up and sent back to the battle zone, right? They weren't upstairs. They were downstairs in a big room just waiting for their appointments. And I walked in, I was very nervous, didn't know what I was going to say to these wounded guys. One of them saw me and his face lit up and he said, "Lieutenant Dan," he started screaming at me. And then everybody else who had been very somber and quiet, before he said that, they all looked and they started looking at me and they started jumping up and their faces just lit up. Everything changed. And the whole mood in the room just went from very somber, kind of 1,000-yard warrior stare to light. And, "Oh, Gump," and, Lieutenant Dan, Lieutenant Dan. They didn't know what my name was. They wanted to take pictures. They wanted to do all this. And it really made me feel good. I was apprehensive before walking into that hospital, thinking like, how am I going to react and what's it going to be like? And when I left the hospital that day, after going upstairs and seeing very badly wounded people that were going to get sent home, I remember sitting on the bus, just leaving the hospital thinking I'd done some good that day. It wasn't about me and my feelings about, going to the hospital. It was about them and what just showing up can do for somebody. So I continue to volunteer and go out and show up. And, I know Tom Hanks has done some of that. I've turned it into a full-time, full-on Gary Sinise Foundation mission. I hope Tom raises some good money with that coffee and he sends it my way a little bit. We'll do some good with it.
Love that. I want to cut you loose on this. Obviously, the play is going to be 2 days, a little bit later this week here in Chicago. It's going to be a thing that more people are going to want to see. Is there more of a plan to maybe get it out there? Or is any more of maybe are we going to record it and make it available for people maybe who can't make it? How can they see it?
Yeah, it's a very powerful play, and it's an all veteran cast. Many of them, most of them have never been in a play before, and they're extraordinary. And what our hope is, we sponsored it in Tampa, where Scott is based. We just sent it to Washington, D.C. for 4 performances. We got these 2 performances at Steppenwolf, and now we're setting up performances all around the country as part of our relief and resiliency outreach at the Gary Sinise Foundation. We want to always be proactive in reaching out and engaging with veterans who may be struggling, who quite often they won't talk about it. They'll hold it in. They won't tell somebody they're hurting. And a play like this, seeing it, just like you go to see a movie or something like that, and you recognize, like what happened when Vietnam veterans saw Lieutenant Dan in Forrest Gump, it can open doors. It can make people start to speak out, to speak up. We have a very serious suicide problem within the military services. We have, after the kind of mess that we left in Afghanistan, you've got a lot of Afghanistan veterans who are struggling with that. What was it all for? What did it all mean? We want to be proactive at the Gary Sinise Foundation and reaching out and touching these folks. And we hope to be able to do that with Last Out by sending it around the country and letting the veteran community in those cities that we send it to know that we're there and we want to see them.
I'm excited. I'm going. It's my birthday tomorrow. That was me treating myself. I'm going this weekend to go see it. I'm dying to see it. And seriously, it is such an honor to be able to meet you and to be able to spread the word about this. And I'm going to really quickly, if you don't mind, if you can't tell, Forrest Gump is one of my favorite films of all time. I'm sort of the pop culture nerd here at our station on Good Day Chicago. And one of the most annoying things in the world to me that I bring up about once a week on the show is that my anchor and one of my very good friends, one of my co-anchors, Sylvia Perez, has never seen Forrest Gump. And it just, she had kids whenever it came out and she didn't get around to seeing it. I was just wondering if maybe if you could tell Sylvia that she should see Forrest Gump, because it really is a masterpiece.
Sylvia, you might, well, it's very funny. I'll play these concerts on military bases, right? And there'll be thousands of people in the audience. And sometimes I say, I'll say, how many people have seen Forrest Gump? And, thousands of people start screaming and yelling. And then I'll say, is there anybody here who hasn't seen Forrest Gump that's over 10 years old? And it's dead quiet. Maybe one person in the back goes like this. Well, I guess Sylvia falls into that category.
Sylvia is the one person.
Sylvia is the one lone person in the thousands that
we'll get her.
Well, she can look forward to it. It's a wonderful movie. It's beautifully made by Bob Zemeckis, written by Eric Roth. Tom Hanks is outstanding. It's a great cast. I learned a lot. I had a great time doing it. And who would have known that 30 years ago, I'd still be associated with a character? But because Lieutenant Dan was so significant and meant so much to our veterans, I'm happy to continue to be associated with Lieutenant Dan. It's a great story. It's the story that we want for every single wounded veteran coming home from war. We want them to be able to process, what happened to them and move on and be successful.
I love that. Mr. Sinise, on behalf of everyone, I just want to say thank you for everything that you have done, that you're doing, and that you continue to do. We're excited to host the show this weekend. And really, I've wanted to interview you for years, so I appreciate you taking the time. It's really an honor, sir.
Jake, thanks so much for having me.
Of course.
Look forward to and let me know how you like the show.
I absolutely will. I'm dying to see it.
I would encourage you afterwards to reach out to Scott Mann and bring him on and talk to him about it. It's we're really hoping to take it all over the country.
Absolutely, we'll do that, sir. I appreciate your time.
You bet. God bless.
Take care. You too.
Bye-bye.
Where we're going, we don't need roads.